The rain fell in freezing sheets the night Kira Sutton collapsed at the gates of Whitmore Manor, with her 3-year-old daughter burning with fever in her arms. She had been walking for hours through the storm, her worn sneakers soaked through, her fingers numb around the bundle of blankets protecting little Emma from the worst of the downpour. The eviction notice had given them 3 days, but the landlord had changed the locks after 2. Kira had spent the last of her money on Emma's medication, and when the fever spiked again that evening, she'd known they couldn't spend another night in her car. The shelters were full. Her phone was dead. And then she'd seen the mansion rising from the hillside like something out of a Gothic dream, lights glowing in its windows, promising warmth. She didn't care that the iron gates were 12 feet tall or that the property screamed private wealth. Her daughter was whimpering against her chest, small body trembling, and Kira would beg if she had to. She pressed the intercom button with shaking fingers, once, twice, 3 times. "Please," she whispered into the speaker, her voice cracking. "Please, I just need one night. My daughter is sick. Just one night's shelter. I'll leave in the morning. Please." Static answered her. Then silence. Kira's knees buckled. She sank against the gate, pulling Emma tighter against her, trying to shield her from the rain with her own body. Hot tears mixed with the cold water streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered against Emma's damp hair. "Mommy's so sorry." The gate swung open without a sound. Kira's head snapped up. Through the rain she could see a figure standing at the mansion's entrance, silhouetted against the golden light spilling from the doorway. Tall, impossibly still, she didn't question it. She stumbled to her feet and ran up the long driveway, her lungs burning, Emma's weight growing heavier with each step. By the time she reached the entrance, her vision was blurring. The figure stepped into the light, and Kira's breath caught. He was beautiful in a way that seemed almost inhuman. White hair fell past his shoulders in a straight, silken curtain. His skin was pale as moonlight, flawless and cold-looking. His eyes were a deep crimson that should have terrified her, but she was too desperate to care. He wore all black, perfectly tailored, and carried himself with the kind of absolute authority that made her instinctively want to lower her gaze. "Inside," he said. His voice was deep, measured, and held an accent she couldn't quite place. Old-world European, perhaps. Kira didn't need to be told twice. She stumbled past him into a foyer that took her breath away. Marble floors, a chandelier dripping with crystals, sweeping staircases on either side. But she barely registered the opulence. "My daughter," she gasped. "She has a fever. She needs—" The man moved faster than should have been possible. One moment he was behind her, the next he was in front of her, lifting Emma from her arms with surprising gentleness. "How long has she been ill?" he asked, carrying Emma toward one of the staircases. 3 days. The medication isn't working. I was going to take her to the emergency room tomorrow, but we had nowhere to stay tonight, and I couldn't keep her in the car, not in this weather." Kira's words tumbled over each other as she followed him up the stairs, her wet shoes squeaking on the marble. He didn't respond, just carried Emma down a hallway, lined with portraits of stern-faced people in old-fashioned clothing. He pushed open a door to reveal a bedroom larger than Kira's entire former apartment. He laid Emma on the massive 4-poster bed with a care that seemed at odds with his austere appearance. "Stay with her," he commanded, then vanished from the room. Kira knelt beside the bed, pulling off Emma's wet clothes with trembling fingers, wrapping her in the heavy duvet. Emma's eyes fluttered open. "Mama?" "I'm here, sweetheart. We're somewhere safe now, somewhere warm." The man returned carrying towels, dry clothes that looked like they might be silk pajamas, and a first aid kit. Behind him came an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, carrying a tray with a steaming bowl and more towels. "Thank you," Kira whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you so much." The man ignored her gratitude, his attention focused entirely on Emma. He placed one pale hand on her forehead, and his expression darkened. "The fever is high. Too high." He turned to the older woman. "Margot, bring ice and call Dr. Thorne." "At this hour, Master Yoren?" the woman asked carefully. "Now." The authority in his voice brooked no argument. Margot hurried from the room. Kira changed Emma into the dry pajamas while the man, Yoren, apparently watched with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, she felt oddly safe. "What's your name?" he asked. "Kira Sutton. This is Emma. And you have nowhere else to go." It wasn't a question, but Kira answered anyway. No, I lost my job 2 months ago, my apartment last week. I've been applying everywhere, but without childcare, it's... She stopped, swallowing hard. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear my life story. You've already done more than I had any right to ask. Yoren's crimson eyes fixed on her face, and Kira felt pinned by that gaze. You walked miles in a storm rather than let your child suffer. You have nothing to apologize for. Something in his voice made her chest tighten. She looked away, focusing on smoothing Emma's damp hair. Margot returned with a basin of ice water and cloths. Yoren took them from her and proceeded to place cool compresses on Emma's forehead and wrists with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Kira watched, confused and grateful, as this strange, elegant man cared for her daughter with more attention than even some of the doctors at the clinic had shown. An hour later, a middle-aged man in an expensive coat arrived carrying a medical bag. Dr. Thorne, Kira assumed. He examined Emma thoroughly while Yoren stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Bacterial infection, Dr. Thorne finally announced. The medication she was on wasn't strong enough. I'll prescribe something more effective. He pulled a prescription pad from his bag and scribbled on it. She should improve within 24 hours. Thank you, Kira said, reaching for the prescription. Her heart sank as she saw the medication name. It would be expensive. Too expensive. I'll have it filled immediately, Yoren said, taking the prescription from her hand before she could protest. He handed it to Margot. Use the private pharmacy. Have it delivered within the hour. Of course, Master Yoren. Kira opened her mouth to object, to say she couldn't accept more charity, but the words died in her throat when Yoren turned those crimson eyes on her again. Your daughter needs medicine. You need rest. We will discuss everything else tomorrow. It was clearly a dismissal. Dr. Thorne left, Margot disappeared to arrange for the medication, and Kira found herself alone with her sleeping daughter and this mysterious man who'd opened his home to strangers without question. Why are you helping us? She asked quietly. Yoren was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving to Emma's small form on the bed. This house has been empty for too long. What good is power and wealth if it cannot be used to protect those who need protecting? It was a strange answer, formal and oddly old-fashioned. Kira studied him more carefully, noting details she'd been too panicked to register before. His skin wasn't just pale, it seemed to have an almost luminescent quality in the lamplight. His movements were too smooth, too graceful. And those eyes... You're not human, she said suddenly. She expected denial or anger, or for him to throw them out into the rain. Instead, Yoren simply inclined his head. No, I am not. Kira's heart should have been racing. She should have been afraid, but something in his steady gaze calmed her. What are you? I am vampire, and I am the last of my kind in this region. He moved to the window, gazing out at the storm. This manor has been my home for 3 centuries. I've seen wars, plagues, and the rise and fall of empires. But in all that time, no one has stood at my gates begging for shelter as you did tonight. I'm sorry, Kira whispered. I didn't mean to intrude on your privacy. He turned to face her, and something flickered in his expression. You misunderstand. I am glad you came. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning Kira didn't fully understand. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how she must look soaked, exhausted, her clothes cheap and worn. Margot will prepare a room for you, Yoren continued. You will stay until your daughter is fully recovered. Then we will discuss what comes next. I can't. You can. And you will. There was steel in his voice now. I will not send a mother and sick child back into the storm. This is not a negotiation. Kira wanted to argue, to maintain some shred of pride, but she was so tired, and Emma needed to be warm and safe. So she simply nodded. Yoren studied her for another moment, then moved toward the door. He paused at the threshold. You are safe here, Kira Sutton. No harm will come to you or your daughter under my roof. You have my word. Then he was gone, and Kira was left alone with Emma and the strange, impossible truth that she'd just put their lives in the hands of a vampire. Kira woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and Emma's small hand patting her face. Mama, I'm hungry. Relief flooded through Kira as she sat up. Emma's forehead was cool. The fever had broken. Her daughter's brown eyes were bright and alert again, her cheeks flushed with healthy color instead of illness. "Oh, thank God," Kira breathed, pulling Emma into a tight hug. They were both in the massive bed, still wearing the silk pajamas from the night before. Kira's clothes hung by the fireplace, dry now. The room itself was stunning in the daylight, high ceilings with ornate molding, antique furniture that probably cost more than Kira had earned in a year at her old job, and windows that overlooked manicured gardens. A soft knock interrupted her observations. Margot entered carrying a tray laden with breakfast. "Good morning," the older woman said with a warm smile. "Master Yoren thought you might be hungry. How is the little one?" "So much better. The medicine worked. I don't know how to thank—" "Master Yoren asked that you join him in his study when you're ready," Margot interrupted gently. "Take your time. There's no rush." After they'd eaten and Kira had helped Emma dress in the child-sized clothes that had mysteriously appeared in the room overnight, Margot led them through the mansion. In daylight, Whitmore Manor was even more impressive. Every room they passed spoke of old money and older tastes, velvet drapes, oil paintings, furniture that belonged in museums. Yoren's study was on the ground floor, a vast room lined with bookshelves reaching toward a coffered ceiling. He sat behind a desk carved from dark wood, his white hair pulled back from his face, making his striking features even more prominent. He wore a black shirt and looked as though he hadn't slept, though Kira supposed vampires didn't need sleep the same way humans did. He rose when they entered, his attention immediately going to Emma. "You look much improved, little one." Emma, typically shy around strangers, studied him with open curiosity. "You have funny eyes." Kira felt her face heat. "Emma, that's not polite." But Yoren's lips curved slightly, the closest thing to a smile Kira had seen from him. "They are unusual, aren't they?" "What color are they?" "Red," Emma said promptly. "Like rubies. We learned about gems in story time." Very observant. He gestured to a corner of the study where cushions and toys had been arranged. "Margot brought those for you. You may play while I speak with your mother." Emma's eyes went wide with delight. She looked up at Kira for permission, and when Kira nodded, she scampered over to investigate the toys. Yoren turned his attention to Kira, and she felt the full weight of his focus like a physical thing. "Sit, please." Kira perched on the edge of an antique chair, her hands folded in her lap. "Thank you for everything, the medicine, the room, the clothes. I'll pay you back as soon as I can. It might take time, but I promise." "I do not want your money," Yoren said quietly. "Then what do you want?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended, edged with the wariness she'd learned from too many men who'd offered help with strings attached. Yoren's expression didn't change, but something flashed in his eyes. "Understanding, perhaps. Your circumstances interest me. A mother alone, struggling to survive in a world that offers little mercy to those without resources or support. You have no family?" Kira shook her head. "My parents died when I was 20. Emma's father left before she was born. It's just been us for 3 years now. And yet you fight to give her a good life." "She's my daughter. Of course I do." "Not everyone would." Yoren leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "I have a proposition for you, Kira Sutton." Her stomach tightened. "What kind of proposition?" "The kind that benefits us both. This house is large and has been empty, save for Margot and myself, for decades. I have wealth beyond measure but little use for it. You need stability and security for your child. I propose you stay here." Kira blinked. "Stay here? As in, live here?" "Yes. You would have your own rooms, access to everything the manor offers. In exchange, you would manage the household. Margot is aging and could use assistance. The manor requires maintenance, organization, a living presence. You would be my estate manager." It sounded too good to be true. Kira's instincts screamed at her to be suspicious. Why would you offer this to a complete stranger? Yoren was quiet for a long moment, his crimson eyes never leaving her face. "I told you last night that this house has been empty for too long. That was true, but incomplete. I have been alone for too long. Vampires are not solitary creatures by nature. We are meant to live in covens, in courts. But my court died out decades ago, victims of vampire hunters in time. I am the last of the Whitmore line, the last vampire king of the Eastern Territories, and I find that immortality without purpose is hollow. There was something in his voice that made Kira's chest ache. Loneliness, ancient and bone deep. "You want company," she said softly. "I want life in these halls again. Your daughter's laughter, your presence, a reason to do more than simply exist." He held her gaze. "I'm offering you employment, Kira. A fair wage, room and board, security, nothing more. There are no hidden expectations. You will be safe here." Kira looked over at Emma, who was happily playing with a stuffed animal that probably cost more than Kira's first car. Then she looked back at Yoren, at this vampire king who'd opened his doors to them without hesitation. "What about Emma's education, her health care? What happens if I decide to leave?" "She would attend the best schools, all medical expenses covered, and if you choose to leave, I will help you establish yourself elsewhere." "You are not a prisoner, Kira. You are a guest who I hope will choose to stay." It was insane. All of it. And yet, "What's the wage?" she asked, and saw something like approval flicker in Yoren's eyes. He named a figure that made her head spin. More than she'd earned as a paralegal, and that was before factoring in the room, board, and benefits. "That's too much," she protested. "It is what the position is worth." He stood, moving to the window. "I will not insult you by offering charity disguised as employment. You will work for what you earn. Managing this estate is no small task, but you will be compensated fairly, and you and your daughter will want for nothing." Kira's mind raced. It solved everything: housing, income, security, health care. And something in her gut said she could trust him. This vampire who'd cared for Emma with such gentleness, who'd spoken to her with respect despite the circumstances that had brought her to his door. "Okay," she said. "Yes, I accept." Yoren turned from the window, and for the first time, she saw him truly smile. It transformed his face, making him look less austere and more alive. "Excellent. Margot will help you settle in properly. Take a few days to rest and recover. We can discuss your duties once you and Emma are fully adjusted." As Kira stood to leave, Yoren spoke again. "Kira?" She turned back. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for coming to my gates, for trusting me." The words settled warm in her chest. "Thank you for answering." The days that followed were a blur of adjustment and wonder. Margot showed Kira through every room of the manor, explaining the routines and requirements. The house had 15 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a ballroom that hadn't been used in 50 years, a library that rivaled small-town collections, and a kitchen that would have made professional chefs weep with envy. Kira and Emma were given a suite on the second floor, a bedroom for each of them connected by a shared sitting room. Emma was delighted by everything, treating the manor like a fairy tale palace. She followed Margot everywhere, chattering constantly, bringing life and noise to halls that had been silent for decades. Yoren kept different hours, as befitted a vampire. Kira rarely saw him during the day, though sometimes she'd catch glimpses of him disappearing into the manor's lower levels, where Margot explained his private chambers were located. He emerged in the evenings, always immaculately dressed, always composed. But Kira began to notice small changes. He started leaving his study door open when he worked. He'd pause in hallways to listen when Emma sang to herself. He asked Kira about her day over dinner meals he joined them for, even though he ate nothing, simply sitting with them and asking questions about Emma's new books or Kira's plans for reorganizing the linen closets. "You don't have to eat with us," Kira said one evening after Emma had gone to bed. They were in the library, Kira reviewing household accounts while Yoren read a leather-bound book that looked older than the United States. "I know you don't need food." "No," Yoren agreed, not looking up from his book, "but I enjoy the company. If my presence makes you uncomfortable, I can—" "No," Kira interrupted quickly. "I like it. Emma likes it too. I just didn't want you to feel obligated." He did look up then, his crimson eyes catching the firelight. "I do not do things out of obligation, Kira, not anymore. I am here because I choose to be." Something in the way he looked at her made Kira's breath catch. She looked away, focusing on the ledger in front of her, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. She was growing too comfortable here, too comfortable with him. It was dangerous to feel this safe, this settled. Nothing good lasted forever, especially not for women like her. But the weeks passed, and nothing terrible happened. Emma thrived, her health better than it had been in months. Kira fell into the rhythm of managing the estate, working alongside Margot to maintain the manor's elegance. And every evening, Yoren emerged from his chambers and sought their company. He was different from any man Kira had ever known, formal but not cold, powerful but not cruel. He spoke to Emma with the same respect he showed Kira, answering her endless questions about being a vampire with patient honesty. "Do you drink blood?" Emma asked one night at dinner, completely matter of fact. "Emma," Kira gasped, mortified, but Yoren held up a hand. "It is a fair question. Yes, Emma, I do. All vampires must. But I only drink from blood banks now. I've not fed from a living person in over a century." "Why not?" Emma asked, fascinated. "Because feeding from humans without consent is wrong, and finding those who would freely consent became complicated. So I adapted." He glanced at Kira. "I know this must disturb you." "A little," Kira admitted, "but you've been honest about what you are. I appreciate that." "I will never lie to you," Yoren said quietly, his eyes holding hers. "About anything. You and Emma are under my protection. That is a sacred trust." Kira believed him, which was perhaps the most dangerous thing of all. 2 months after they'd arrived at Whitmore Manor, everything changed. Kira was in the ballroom with Margot, discussing whether to have the floors refinished, when she heard Emma scream. Terror shot through her. She ran from the ballroom, following the sound of her daughter's cries, her heart pounding. She found Emma in the entrance hall, backed into a corner by a man Kira had never seen before. He was tall and thin, with white blonde hair and eyes so pale they were nearly colorless. Like Yoren, his skin was alabaster pale. Unlike Yoren, there was nothing regal about him. He looked hungry. "Emma!" Kira rushed forward, putting herself between her daughter and the stranger. "Get away from her!" The man's lips pulled back, revealing fangs. "Such a pretty little thing. And she smells so sweet. Young blood always tastes the best. Touch her and die." Yoren's voice cut through the hall like a blade. He appeared at the top of the staircase, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. His eyes were blazing crimson, and power radiated from him in almost visible waves. This was not the gentle vampire who read Emma bedtime stories. This was the Vampire King. The intruder took a step back, his confidence faltering. "Lord Yoren, I meant no disrespect. I didn't know you kept pets." "They are not pets. They are under my protection, which means they are untouchable. You know the laws, Silas." "The old laws don't apply anymore," Silas said, but his voice shook. "The courts are gone. Every vampire for themselves now." "Not in my territory." Yoren descended the stairs with lethal grace. "You violated my threshold, threatened those under my care. The punishment for such offenses has not changed in 1,000 years." Silas moved fast, vampire quick, lunging for Emma. But Yoren was faster. He caught Silas mid-lunge, slamming him against the marble floor with enough force to crack the stone. Kira grabbed Emma, shielding her daughter's eyes as Yoren's hand closed around Silas's throat. "You chose poorly," Yoren said, his voice cold as death. "Pray there is mercy on the other side." There was a terrible cracking sound, then silence. Yoren stood, not a hair out of place, and turned to face Kira and Emma. His expression softened immediately. "Are you hurt?" Kira shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Emma was sobbing against her shoulder. "Margot," Yoren called, and the older woman appeared instantly. "Take them upstairs. Stay with them. I will handle this." Margot gently guided Kira and Emma up the stairs. Kira looked back once and saw Yoren kneeling beside the body, his expression grim. An hour later, after Emma had finally cried herself to sleep, Yoren knocked softly on the suite door. Kira stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. "Is she all right?" he asked. "Physically, yes. Emotionally." Kira wrapped her arms around herself. "She's never seen violence like that before." "I'm sorry." Yoren's voice was heavy with regret. "I never wanted to bring danger to your door, but Silas was one of the last vampires who refused to accept the new order. He has been hunting humans in my territory for months. I have been tracking him. I did not expect him to be so foolish as to enter my home." "What happens now?" Kira asked. "Are there more like him?" "A few. But they will hear what happened here. They will know that I still enforce the old laws, that those under my protection are sacrosanct. This will not happen again." Kira wanted to believe him. but fear had taken root in her chest. Maybe Emma and I should leave, go somewhere safer. Nowhere is safer than here. Yoren stepped closer, and Kira could see the fierce protectiveness burning in his eyes. I swear to you, Kira, on my name and blood, nothing will harm your daughter while I draw breath. I have lived for 300 years. I have commanded armies and ruled territories, and I will use every ounce of that power to keep you both safe. Why? The word burst from her. Why do you care so much? We're nothing to you. Humans you met 2 months ago. Yoren's hand came up slowly, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, he cupped her cheek gently, his skin cool against hers. You are not nothing. You are everything this house has been missing, everything I have been missing. Kira's breath caught. Yoren, I do not say this to frighten you or to complicate our arrangement. I say it because you deserve honesty. Because you asked me why I care. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I care because when you smile, this house feels like a home. Because your daughter's laughter is the most beautiful sound I have heard in a century. Because you are strong and fierce and kind, and watching you build a life here has reminded me what it means to truly live rather than simply exist. Tears burned in Kira's eyes. I care about you too. More than I should. More than is smart. Then perhaps we are both fools, Yoren said softly. But I would rather be a fool with you than wise and alone. He leaned forward slowly, telegraphing his intention. Kira could have pulled away. Should have pulled away. Instead, she closed the distance between them. The kiss was gentle, almost tentative. His lips were cool but not cold, soft against hers. It lasted only a moment before he pulled back, his forehead resting against hers. I will protect you, he whispered, both of you, with everything I am. I know, Kira whispered back. I trust you. And she did. Completely. Impossibly. She trusted this vampire king with her life and her daughter's life. And somewhere along the way, she'd given him her heart as well. In the days following the attack, Yoren became hyper-vigilant. He had wards placed around the manor, ancient vampire magic that would alert him to any supernatural presence crossing the property line. He hired additional security, human guards who patrolled the grounds, and he spent every evening with Kira and Emma as if his presence alone could shield them from harm. Emma recovered from the fright faster than Kira expected. Children were resilient that way. She went back to playing in the garden and demanding that Yoren read her increasingly complicated bedtime stories. But she insisted on sleeping in Kira's room now, and Kira didn't have the heart to refuse. Kira's feelings for Yoren grew deeper with each passing day. She found herself watching for him in the evenings, her pulse quickening when he entered a room. They began taking walks together through the gardens after Emma was asleep, talking about everything and nothing. He told her stories of his human life in the 1700s, of his transformation, of the vampire courts that had once ruled the shadows of Europe. We were magnificent once, he said one evening, his voice tinged with melancholy. They were sitting on a stone bench overlooking the rose garden, the moon casting silver light across the grounds. Dozens of noble houses, each with their territories and courts. We had laws, culture, art. We were more than monsters. We were civilization. What happened? Kira asked. Hunters became too efficient, and some vampires became too careless. Wars with humans we could not win. One by one, the great houses fell. My own court was destroyed in 1923. I was away, negotiating with another lord. When I returned, my entire household was dead. 50 vampires burned in their sleep. Kira reached for his hand. He laced his fingers through hers, holding tight. I rebuilt what I could here, maintained the territory, enforced the laws, but there were fewer and fewer of us to enforce them upon. Now there are perhaps a dozen vampires left in the entire eastern seaboard, and most of them are young, feral things who never knew the courts. They hunt humans like animals. They have forgotten what we were. You haven't forgotten, Kira said softly. No. I am the last of the old ways, the last king of a dead court. He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight his eyes seemed to glow. Until you came, and suddenly I remembered what it was to have something worth protecting, worth living for. I'm just a human, Kira whispered. I'll grow old, die. You'll live forever. I have lived long enough to know that forever means nothing without someone to share it with. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. I would rather have 50 years with you than an eternity alone. Kira's heart clenched. Yoren, I don't know if this can work. The differences between us are irrelevant. What matters is this. He placed her hand over his chest. She could feel his heart beating, slower than a human's, but steady and strong. I am still capable of love, Kira, and I love you. I love your strength, your devotion to your daughter, your kindness. I love the way you organize the linen closets and argue with me about household budgets. I love the sound of your laughter and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating. I love you, and I will love you for as long as you will allow me to. Tears spilled down Kira's cheeks. I love you too. God help me, I love you too. He kissed her then, deeper than before, and Kira melted into him. His hand cupped the back of her head, fingers tangling in her hair. She could feel the leashed power in him, the strength he held carefully in check so as not to hurt her. It made her feel safe and cherished in a way she'd never experienced before. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yoren rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me, not as my employee, as my partner, my companion. Let me court you properly as you deserve. Yes, Kira breathed, yes. The courtship of a vampire king, Kira discovered, was an elaborate affair. Yoren seemed determined to romance her properly by standards that hadn't been fashionable in 2 centuries. He brought her gifts, antique jewelry from his vaults, first-edition books, silk dresses and jewel tones that made her feel like royalty. He arranged for musicians to play during dinner. He took her dancing in the ballroom, teaching her waltzes and other formal dances while Emma watched and giggled from the sidelines. This is ridiculous, Kira laughed one evening as he spun her across the floor. No one dances like this anymore. Then we will bring it back into fashion, Yoren said, pulling her closer. I want to give you everything, Kira. Everything I could not give to the court I lost. Let me spoil you. Let me worship you as you deserve. How could she say no to that? Emma adored the new arrangement. She'd grown attached to Yoren over the months, and now that he was openly courting Kira, he became a fixture in both their lives. He taught Emma to play chess, read her books in 3 different languages, and took her on walks through the grounds, answering her endless questions with infinite patience. Is Yoren going to be my dad? Emma asked one night as Kira tucked her into bed. Kira's breath caught. Would you like that? Emma nodded vigorously. He's nice, and he makes you smile. You didn't smile much before we came here. Oh, sweetheart. Kira hugged her daughter close. You're right. I'm much happier now. Me too, Emma said. I like living in the fancy house, and I really like Yoren, even if he does have red eyes and drink blood. Kira laughed despite herself. Even with the red eyes and blood drinking. 3 months into their courtship, Yoren invited Kira to his private chambers. She'd never been to that part of the manor before the subterranean levels where he slept during the day, away from the sunlight that could kill him. I want you to see all of me, he explained as he led her down a stone staircase. Know all of me. If we are to build a life together, there should be no secrets between us. The lower levels were surprisingly elegant. No dank dungeons or coffins, as Kira had half feared. Instead, she found a suite of rooms carved from stone, but furnished with the same care as the rest of the manor. His bedroom held a massive bed with heavy curtains that could block out all light. Bookshelves lined every wall. A desk held correspondence and ledgers detailing his business interests. Apparently, 3 centuries gave one time to build quite the investment portfolio. This is where you spend your days? Kira asked, trailing her fingers along a bookshelf. Yes, I sleep, read, handle correspondence with the few other old vampires who remain. He moved to stand behind her, his hands settling on her waist. It has been a lonely existence, but I find myself looking forward to sunset now, knowing you will be waiting above. Kira turned in his arms, looping her hands around his neck. I'm always waiting for you. He kissed her, and the kiss quickly deepened. His hands moved over her back, her waist, careful but increasingly desperate. Kira pressed closer, desire pooling hot in her belly. Kira, he groaned against her mouth, if we continue, I will not want to stop. Then don't stop, she whispered. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Are you certain? I need you to be certain. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Yoren. I want this. I want you. Something blazed in his crimson eyes. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the bed. They came together with a hunger that spoke of months of restrained desire, finally unleashed. His hands were everywhere, cool against her flushed skin. His lips mapped every inch of her, reverent and passionate by turns. "You are exquisite," he murmured against her throat. "Perfect. Mine." "Yours," Kira agreed breathlessly. "I'm yours." When they finally joined, it felt like coming home. He moved with controlled power, making love to her with an intensity that left her shaking. And when she fell apart in his arms, crying out his name, he followed her over the edge with a groan that sounded like a prayer. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Kira's head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "I have lived for 300 years, Yoren said quietly, "but I have never felt this content." Kira smiled, pressing a kiss to his cool skin. "Neither have I." "Marry me?" She went still. "What?" He shifted to look down at her, his expression serious. "Marry me, Kira. Let me be your husband and Emma's father in truth. Let us be a family." "Yoren, we've only known each other 6 months. I have lived long enough to know when something is worth keeping. You are worth keeping. Emma is worth keeping. I want to make this official. I want the world to know you are mine and I am yours." Kira's heart raced. It was fast, too fast. But when had anything about their relationship been conventional? "What about the practical concerns?" she asked. "You're immortal. I'm not. How does that work long term?" "There are options," Yoren said carefully. "Vampirism can be passed through exchange of blood if both parties are willing. You could become like me if you chose, or you could remain human, and I would cherish every year I have with you, however many that may be. The choice would be entirely yours. And Emma would be my daughter in every way that matters. I would protect her, provide for her, love her as my own. When she is grown, if she wishes to explore the option of vampirism, we could discuss it, but that would be her choice to make as an adult." Kira searched his face, seeing only sincerity and love reflected back at her. This vampire king who'd opened his home to a desperate stranger in the rain, who'd cared for her sick daughter, who'd courted her with old-fashioned romance and defended her with deadly force, who loved her. "Ask me again in 6 months," she said finally. "Let's make sure this is real, that it lasts. If we still feel this way next spring, then yes, I'll marry you." Yoren smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "A wise compromise. Very well. 6 months. But I warn you, I will spend every day of those 6 months convincing you that this is real and lasting." "I'm counting on it," Kira said, pulling him down for another kiss. The autumn passed in a blur of happiness. Kira had never believed she could feel this settled, this secure. Yoren was everything she'd never known to hope for: devoted, protective, endlessly patient with Emma, passionate with her. The manor had become home in the truest sense. She officially took on the role of lady of the house, no longer just estate manager, but Yoren's acknowledged companion. The few visitors who came to the manor, other vampires seeking audience with the last king of the Eastern Territories, treated her with respect bordering on deference. They recognize you as my consort," Yoren explained after one such visit. "In vampire culture, that grants you significant status. You are untouchable now, protected not just by my personal power, but by ancient law." "I'm not sure how I feel about being untouchable," Kira admitted. "Feel safe," Yoren said simply. "Feel cherished, because that is what you are." Emma thrived. She was enrolled in an exclusive private school where she excelled. She made friends, took ballet lessons, and came home every day bursting with stories. Watching her daughter flourish, Kira felt a peace she'd never known. One evening in late December, Yoren called Kira down to his study. She found him standing by the window, snow falling softly outside, his expression unreadable. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. "Nothing is wrong, but I have something I need to discuss with you." He turned to face her. "There are 3 vampires left in the old courts besides myself. I have been in contact with them, and we are considering reforming the council, establishing new courts, new order, bringing back the old ways before they are lost entirely." "That's wonderful," Kira said. You've wanted this for so long. It would mean changes, Yoren continued. Visitors, gatherings here at the manor, possibly danger, as there are still feral vampires who oppose any return to the old structures. I need to know if you are willing to face that, to truly become part of this world. Kira crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. I knew what you were when I fell in love with you. I knew there would be challenges, but I also know that you will protect Emma and me with everything you have, and I want to support you in this. If rebuilding the courts is important to you, then it's important to me. Yoren pulled her close, holding her tight. You are extraordinary. I do not deserve you. Yes, you do, Kira said firmly. You deserve happiness and a future, and someone who loves you. And I do. Love you, I mean. More than I can ever adequately express. Show me, he whispered against her hair. So she did, leading him to his chambers and spending the night demonstrating just how much she loved him in ways both tender and fierce. The winter solstice marked 6 months since Kira had first knocked on Whitmore Manor's gates. Yoren planned an elaborate celebration, a formal dinner for just the 3 of them, with the ballroom lit by 1,000 candles and the table laden with dishes Kira loved. Emma wore a new dress and declared herself a princess. Kira wore emerald silk that Yoren had commissioned, and he wore formal attire that made him look like he'd stepped out of a historical portrait. After dinner, while Emma played in the corner with new toys, Yoren took Kira's hand and led her to the center of the ballroom. Music swelled from hidden speakers, a waltz, of course. 6 months, he said as they began to dance, as promised, and I love you more now than I did then. Marry me, Kira. Let me spend eternity loving you. Tears blurred Kira's vision. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yoren produced a ring from his pocket, a ruby set in platinum, surrounded by diamonds. It was antique and beautiful and perfect. He slid it onto her finger with hands that weren't quite steady. You have made me the happiest man in 300 years, he said. Mama's getting married, Emma shouted, having been not so subtly eavesdropping. She ran over and threw her arms around both of them. Does this mean Yoren is my dad now? Yoren knelt down to Emma's level, his expression serious. If you will have me, Emma, I would be honored to be your father. Okay, Emma said brightly, but you have to come to ballet recitals and stuff. That's what dads do. I will attend every ballet recital, Yoren promised solemnly, and school play and parent-teacher conference and anything else you require of me. And you have to read bedtime stories. I already do that. And play tea party. I shall endeavor to improve my tea party skills. Emma giggled and hugged him. Over her head, Yoren met Kira's eyes, and the love there took her breath away. They married in the spring, in the manor's gardens, under a canopy of flowering trees. It was a small ceremony, just Margot, Emma, and a justice of the peace who asked no questions about the groom's unusual appearance. Kira wore white lace, Emma wore pink, and Yoren wore a suit that had been tailored in 1890 and still looked impeccable. I, Yoren Whitmore, take you, Kira Sutton, to be my wife, he said, his voice carrying across the garden. I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my existence. Whether you remain human or choose to walk beside me into immortality, my devotion will never waver. Kira's vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. I, Kira Sutton, take you, Yoren Whitmore, to be my husband. You gave me shelter when I had nowhere else to turn. You gave me love when I'd stopped believing in it. You gave us a home and a family. I promise to love you, support you, and stand beside you whatever challenges we face. When they kissed as husband and wife, Emma cheered loudly enough to startle birds from the trees. That night, after Emma was finally asleep, Kira and Yoren retreated to his chambers. He made love to her slowly, reverently, whispering promises against her skin. My wife, my love, my everything. Afterward, curled against his side, Kira broached the subject she'd been considering for months. Tell me about the turning process, she said quietly. About becoming vampire. Yoren went very still. Are you considering it? Maybe. Eventually. I want to know the facts first. He was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. The process requires an exchange of blood. I would drink from you, nearly to the point of death. Then you would drink from me. The transformation takes 3 days. It is not pleasant. Fever, pain as your body dies and reforms. But at the end, you would be vampire, immortal. You would need blood to survive. You would burn in sunlight, but you would be strong, fast, nearly indestructible, and we could be together for centuries. What about Emma? Would I still be able to care for her? Yes, you would still be you, Kira, just enhanced. Your love for her would not change, though you would need to be careful of your strength at first. Kira considered this. Not yet. I want to see her grow up first. See her graduate high school at least. But after, maybe, if the option is still open. It will always be open, Yoren promised. For as long as you live, the choice will be yours to make. Do you want me to turn? She asked. Be honest. I want you happy, he said simply. If you are happy as human, I will cherish every mortal year with you. If you choose immortality, I will be grateful for the centuries we will share. Your happiness is all that matters to me. Kira kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. I am happy, happier than I ever dreamed possible. The years that followed were filled with joy. Emma grew from a 3-year-old into a bright, confident child. Kira thrived in her role as Lady of the Manor and Yoren's wife, and Yoren himself seemed to grow more human, more alive, with each passing season. True to his word, he attended every ballet recital and school play. He helped Emma with homework and taught her vampire history alongside human history. He and Kira hosted the first gathering of the Reformed Vampire Council, bringing together the last of the old vampires to establish new courts and new laws. The manor became a center of vampire culture once again, with visitors from across the world coming to pay respects to the Whitmore court. Kira found herself navigating vampire politics with surprising skill, her human perspective bringing fresh insights to ancient problems. When Emma turned 18, Yoren formally adopted her. She'd known for years that he wasn't her biological father, but he was her dad in every way that mattered. She'd also grown up knowing about vampires, about the supernatural world her mother had married into. I don't want to turn, she told Kira and Yoren over dinner one evening. Not yet, anyway. Maybe when I'm older. But for now, I want to live as human. Go to college, have experiences. Is that okay? More than okay, Yoren assured her. You should live the life you choose, Emma, always. Emma hugged him tight. Thanks, Dad. Over Yoren's shoulder, Emma caught Kira's eye and mouthed, I think you should turn. Kira smiled. She'd been thinking the same thing. That night, she and Yoren discussed it seriously for the first time. Emma was an adult now, independent, and Kira was 34, still young but aware of time's passage in a way she hadn't been before. I want more time with you, she said simply. I want centuries, not just decades. I want to see what we can build together, the courts you'll establish, the future you'll create. And I want to be part of it, not as a human watching from the sidelines, but as your true partner. Yoren cupped her face in his hands, his crimson eyes shining. Are you absolutely certain? Once done, it cannot be undone. I'm certain. Turn me, Yoren. Make me vampire. Make me immortal. Let me stand beside you for the next 300 years. Forever, he corrected softly. Not just 300 years. Forever. Forever, Kira agreed. The transformation was every bit as difficult as Yoren had warned. 3 days of fever and pain, her body dying and reforming at the cellular level. Yoren stayed with her every moment, holding her hand, whispering encouragement and love. Emma visited when she could bear it, though seeing her mother suffer clearly distressed her. But on the third night, Kira opened her eyes to find the world transformed. Everything was sharper, clearer. She could hear conversations happening rooms away. She could smell the roses in the garden despite being underground, and she felt power thrumming through her veins, intoxicating and new. Yoren? She whispered, and her voice sounded different to her own ears. He was there instantly, pulling her into his arms. I am here, my love. You survived. You are vampire now. You are magnificent. Kira looked down at her hands. Her skin had taken on the same alabaster quality as Yoren's, luminous and perfect. When she looked in the mirror, she saw that her eyes had shifted to a deep amber, glowing faintly in the dim light. I'm beautiful, she breathed. You always were, Yoren said, but now you will remain so. Now we have forever. Learning to control her new abilities took time. Yoren was patient, teaching her to manage her strength, to navigate the world as a vampire. The hardest part was the blood requirement. The first time Yoren brought her a blood bag, Kira had been repulsed, but her body had needed it desperately, and she'd learned to accept this new aspect of herself. Emma adjusted to having a vampire mother with surprising grace. "You're still you," she said pragmatically, "just faster and stronger, and now I don't have to worry about you dying anytime soon." The Vampire Council formally recognized Kira as Lady Whitmore, vampire wife to the last vampire king. She took her place beside Yoren at gatherings, helping shape the new vampire laws, advocating for peaceful coexistence with humans. Together, they rebuilt what had been lost. New vampires were carefully vetted and turned only with consent. Courts were re-established across the country, bringing order to chaos, and the Whitmore name once again carried weight in both the vampire and human worlds. Emma eventually married a human man who loved her, despite or perhaps because of her unusual family. They gave Kira and Yoren grandchildren, which delighted them both. Watching Yoren play with babies again, his severe face softening with pure joy, made Kira fall in love with him all over again. Decades passed. Emma grew older, had a full human life, and eventually passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 94, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and the vampire parents who had loved her so deeply. Kira mourned, but there was peace in the grief. Emma had lived well and fully, and she'd left behind a legacy descendants who knew about the vampire world, who helped bridge the gap between human and supernatural. More decades passed, then centuries. The world changed around them, technology advancing, societies evolving. But Kira and Yoren remained constant. They adapted to each era while maintaining the best of the old ways. The Whitmore court became legendary, a beacon of stability in an ever-changing world, and through it all, their love never faltered. If anything, it grew deeper with time. They learned each other's tells and quirks. They supported each other through challenges. They laughed together and danced together and built an immortal life worth living. On the 300th anniversary of the night Kira had first knocked on Whitmore Manor's gates, Yoren arranged a celebration. The ballroom was filled with vampires from courts across the world, all come to honor the couple who had rebuilt their civilization. But Yoren only had eyes for Kira. 300 years, he said as they danced, the same waltz they'd shared on their wedding night. And I love you more than ever. You took a lonely vampire king and gave him purpose, family, joy. Everything I have, everything I am, is yours. Kira smiled up at her husband, her partner, her eternal love. And everything I have is yours. You gave me shelter when I needed it most. You gave me love when I'd stopped believing in it. You gave me forever, and I would choose you again in every lifetime. He kissed her there in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by their court, their family, their legacy. And Kira knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. All those years ago, desperate and afraid, she'd begged for just one night's shelter. The vampire king had given her forever. And forever with Yoren Whitmore was more beautiful than any temporary mortal life could ever have been. They had centuries ahead of them still, centuries to love and build and create. But they also had this moment, this dance, this kiss. And that was everything. Years continued to flow like water. The vampire courts flourished under the Whitmore rule, and Kira became known as the Merciful Queen, the vampire who had once been human and never forgot that compassion. She championed laws that protected both humans and vampires, created systems for ethical blood donation, and established academies where young vampires could learn control and discipline. Yoren watched her work with pride that bordered on awe. "You have done more in 3 centuries than I did in my first millennium," he told her one evening. "We did it together," Kira corrected, lacing her fingers through his. "Everything we built as partners." And it was true. They were equals in every way that mattered. He was the king, she was the queen, and together they ruled with wisdom earned through love and loss and long centuries of life. The Whitmore line continued through Emma's descendants. Some chose to turn when they came of age, joining the vampire courts. Others remained human, living mortal lives but maintaining ties to the supernatural world. All of them knew the story of how their family had been saved by a vampire king who answered a desperate plea in the rain. Kira never forgot that night, never forgot the fear and desperation that had driven her to those gates. It informed every decision she made, every law she supported, every vampire she mentored, because she knew what it was to be powerless and afraid, and she used her immortal power to ensure that no one who came to her gates seeking help would ever be turned away. "You changed me," Yoren said one night, centuries after they'd met. They were in their private chambers, snow falling outside, a fire crackling in the hearth. "I was cold before you. I'd survived for so long that I had forgotten how to truly live. You taught me warmth again, taught me joy. You gave me purpose beyond mere existence." "You saved my life," Kira replied. "Emma's life. You gave us everything." "No, my love." He pulled her close, his cool lips brushing her temple. "You gave me everything, a reason to continue, a future worth building, love worth living for. You are my salvation, Kira, my light in the darkness, my everything." They kissed as snow fell outside their castle, two immortals who had found in each other what most beings searched lifetimes for and never found. Perfect love, complete trust, absolute devotion. The single mother who had begged for just one night's shelter had become an eternal queen. The lonely vampire king had become a husband and father and leader of a thriving court. And together they had built something beautiful and lasting, forever stretched ahead of them, bright with possibility, and they would face it hand in hand, heart to heart, for all the centuries to come. Because sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a desperate plea in the rain, and sometimes forever is exactly as long as it needs to be. The end came not with darkness, but with light, the light of endless tomorrows, of love that transcended mortality, of a family built from chance and choice and courage. Kira and Yoren Whitmore, vampire king and queen, stood together at the window of their manor, watching the sunset over lands they had protected for centuries. "No regrets?" Yoren asked softly. "Not a single one," Kira replied, turning to face her husband. In his crimson eyes she saw reflected back all the love and devotion that filled her own heart. "You? Only that I did not find you sooner. But perhaps we met exactly when we were meant to. Perhaps you needed to become the woman you were that night, strong enough to ask for help, brave enough to trust a monster with your daughter's life. And perhaps I needed to be old enough, lonely enough, to recognize salvation when it collapsed at my gates." "You were never a monster," Kira said firmly. "You were always just a man who had lived too long alone. And now I will never be alone again." "Never," Kira promised. They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, and in the darkness they were home. Because home was not a place, home was not even a time. Home was wherever they were together, and they would be together for all of forever.